Good evening, everyone. We have gathered here for our next panel discussion, Future of Green Finance, aligning DFI and MDBs green financing strategies with AI and Fintech. Let's welcome our moderator, Mr. Sanjay Ghosh, Chief General Manager, NABARD. Also, I would like to invite our speaker, Mr. Hemendra Mathur, Advisor, International Finance Corporation. Mr. Aditya Damani, Founder and CEO, Credit Fair. Mr. Ashutosh Tandon, Operations Officer, Financial Institution Group, Advisory, International Finance Corporation. Mr. Anujeet Kudva, Chief Risk Officer, ECOFI. Ms. Neha Kumar, Head South Asia Climate Bonds Initiative.
Very good afternoon. Shall we begin, right? Okay. Good afternoon to our very distinguished panelists today and our guests in the audience. And as we close towards the final hours of the day 2 of this, what we see is a grand festival, the energy that I get to see since yesterday is simply wow. It's absolute great energy all around. And it's definitely wonderful to be a part of this, And of course, and what we expect basically to be a very, very stimulating conversation along with my panelists. I'm definitely privileged to be here with all of you. So as we quickly get into, I think there's a time paucity which is across the different sessions. So we'll take a few minutes off the given time for introducing our co-panelists. The introduction has been possibly done, but then a quick introduction, a few lines on our co-panelists. We have Mr. Hemendra Mathur on the right of mine, with about close to 30 years of work experience. He represents venture capital funding, equity participation, and many more. We have Mr. Tandon from the IFC Advisory Group, so representing an MDB. We have Ma'am Neha Kumar, who is the head of Asia Pacific of Climate Bond Initiative and the Climate Finance Enabler. Glad that she could make it today. We have Mr. Anujeet, who is, and Mr. Aditya Damani, who is, both of them represent the lending community. In fact, ECOFI, which Mr. Anujeet represents, is the first green NBFC of the country, right? Yeah. So it's a really wonderful panel that we have here. And it's really great, and looking forward to the stimulating conversation which we envisage. So a little bit of the context of today's thing, why this discussion is so very relevant for us, the future of green finance, aligning the DFIs and the MDBs in green financing strategies. In the climate context, we are all aware of the kind of extreme weather events, extreme climate events that's hitting us, both globally and in this country. A quick look at the numbers. Last year alone, as per different reports, there were 600 reported extreme climate events globally. And if we look at the India numbers, it's about 322 days of extreme weather events out of 366 days, as per a recent report by Down to Earth recently. So, this gives us the scale of the issue that actually we are facing as a community, as a citizen of this globe. And this brings us to a very pertinent condition, the kind of financial products that we have probably does not seem to be adequate in addressing this. And this is how this session is so very relevant for us. And in this dynamic and high risk context, we are actually going to listen to our co-panelists about how to integrate AI, integrate fintech, integrate different technologies into the green finance, and then what could be a way forward. This is a little bit of the context that we are looking at. And the entire discussion, the entire theme of this thing is basically, since NABARD, as we all are aware, has been into the climate space since last 2 years, and there have been a couple of developments recently. One is the launching of the green lending product, and of course, launching of the DICRA platform, which is a digital infrastructure platform for climate resilient agriculture. So going ahead, we wish to utilize the DICRA platform, which was initially done by the UNDP, and then subsequently NABARD took it off. And how do we leverage AI, satellite data, weather imageries, and how we have a more informed decision regarding lending techniques, lending practices across more than 50 million hectares of farmland in this country. So that's basically the purpose and theme of today's discussion. With that, I would quickly move towards my first question. Mr. Mathur, would be to you. Yeah, so we are all aware that unlocking climate scalable green finance and in Indian agriculture and climate ecosystem is absolutely pertinent. So from your vantage point as an investor, you have been in this space since last almost 3 decades. So where do you see the most promising AI and fintech innovations in this sphere? And especially in the use of remote sensing, IoT devices, and alternate data sources for credit underwriting. So your thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Anjoy, and thanks, NABARD, for organizing this. Good evening, everyone. I just want to begin by saying that the kind of disruption or digitization that Indian agriculture has seen in the last 10, 15 years is unprecedented. And what we're going to see next 10 years is going to be even better, all I can say. Mostly led by some 1,000-odd startups to begin with. As of now, we have about 10,000 plus agritech startups digitizing the entire value chain. You know, you name it and we have it. The soil data, the weather data, organic carbon, pest surveillance. So I don't think there's any data point which is not digitized. Of course, we need more granularity, we need more frequency, we need more accuracy, which will improve with improvement in hardware. And thankfully, we have the blessings of AI, which makes it even more interesting, right? And I think the third part, I would also say the way government is moving with developing multiple stack. For any innovation to scale in a country like India, where there's a high degree of fragmentation, I don't think we can do it at scale without a stack approach. And that's where government comes into picture. With AgriStack, we are digitizing almost 160 million hectare of farmland, 150 million farmers, and sort of capturing all crop signature across Rabi, Kharif, Zayad, and sort of multiple crops during the year. So it's not unlike Aadhaar or other stacks. It is not a static stack, it's a dynamic stack. So just imagine the sheer sort of gravity and intensity of the problem statement that we are trying to solve with these multiple approaches. And that's where I feel very bullish as an investor that the best is yet to come. I think a lot of startups ask me, is it too late to look at agri-tech, climate tech, fintech? I say no. They spend a lot of money figuring out, and now you guys have some sort of script or template ready, which hopefully will improve your capital efficiency, go to market, and hopefully better returns for the investors. So, sir, I see the investment opportunity across the value chain. I think there's a lot of hardware innovation, there's a lot of software innovation, there are a lot of AI applications. I think one thing which I feel we need to do a lot more is financial innovation. I think our products, financial products, are still pretty standard. We need to move beyond that. Whether we like it or not, it is a regulated industry, BFSI. And that's where NABARD come into picture, that's where RBI come into picture. And I think then, innovators and the startups have to come together for these so-called agri-fintech to scale, right? Otherwise, there will be another pilot, which I don't think many startups or investors are interested in. But I'm very optimistic. I think I avoid using word unicorn. It's a misnomer and an imaginary animal. But all I can say, there's a lot of value to be unlocked in times to come.
Yeah, thank you. So, Mr. Mathur, so what we understand from him is that there's a lot of hope in the air, and agri-fintech, and yeah. So I'll just like to share recent initiative which NABARD has done before we move on to the other panelists. So we have bringing the entire cooperative banking system under the fold of the entire loan tech. So the Sahakari SSL Think Sahakari Sarathi Limited has been formed. So that basically is the IT backbone, which common shared IT backbone across the rural financial institutions, primarily the cooperative sector. So this is something that has happened. I mean, something that you mentioned is very relevant. Of course, we'll come back to you for more later. So as we move on now, so Mr. Ashutosh, IFC has been a pioneer when it comes to green lending, right from its first issuance of green bonds sometime back in 2010, right? So, and given your extensive work in financial institutions globally and your own experience with MSMEs in the climate space, in the digital finance and financial inclusion, how do you think IFC is integrating AI and fintech into its advisory work? That's one, and there's a part B. I'll quickly mention that also. So what key lessons are you learning, and what is it that are emerging from your engagements with banks, NBFCs, and fintech players in advancing the scalable models? Please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Glad to be part of the panel, and good evening, everyone. Just to give a perspective from an IFC side, we, of course, the work which we do covers policy, covers sectoral advisory, covers firm-level advisory. At a broader level, the thematic areas on gender, climate, digital are cross-cutting across all the different projects which we do, both in investment and advisory projects. Just to talk about climate, given that's the key part of the discussion today, 45% of all our portfolio in IFC globally, the target was till 2025 has to be green, has to be climate linked, which is the case. So, we've steadily been very consciously focused on green finance within our overall portfolio as IFC and the World Bank Group. Within the question, Mr. Ghosh, which you asked, that both in terms of advisory, what we've been doing, especially looking at India, maybe one example which I can give, work which we have done more recently in the last 1 year, is to try and understand what are the AI, Gen AI tools which financial institutions are adopting. I think Mr. Hemant mentioned what kind of financial innovations can happen more, within agri, within the different space which is there. Just a snapshot of the study, we spoke to around 15 firms, trying to understand that Gen AI solutions, not AI, which of course a lot of financing companies have already started to adopt in some manner or the other, but more Gen AI solutions, how many companies are starting to adopt, what stage they are at. And we heard, I think from these 15 companies, around 65% odd are still very initial stage, which means they're still trying to understand how to pull together their own data, what kind of products they can themselves design. Only a couple of firms were those which had already started going to POC stage and coming out with products. So one, it's still relatively nascent when it comes to especially Gen AI solutions as far as financial institutions are concerned. Going beyond FIs, I'm of course part of the FIG team, but we do have teams also which work on the real sector, manufacturing, agri teams, as well as teams which work more on policy and more with the government. So one, again, project to highlight, to also kind of talk about the work which IFC is doing. We have an ongoing project with 3 state governments focused on developing the agtech ecosystem. There are 18 companies, 18 agtech companies which have been supported. And this has resulted, I think, the project is still active, but 30,000 odd farmers being supported through these agtechs. We're further, as part of this project, also working with Google Cloud, working with the state government to develop an open agri ecosystem, leveraging the government's agri stack. Again, to try and match make that the agtech firms, the farmers, as well as other solution providers are on a common matchmaking platform. So that's again something which is being done. And maybe just a couple of additional points. Of course, from an investment perspective, we have also made a recent investment last year in Omnivore Fund, which again focuses more on agtech, more on agri-businesses, more on tech solutions. So, there is a lot of work which is being done on digital, on agri. Maybe the last point, which is more global, beyond India, we of course are also learning ourselves. I think, when I went on the ground floor, there's so much innovation already happening in the ecosystem. So, I mean, even as DFI, we are often learning from the market. One solution which we have globally is something called Melena, which is basically an ML tool for ESG analysis. Again, it's meant to be offered. It's an open tool right now. All firms can look at it. It's to kind of look at your own ESG data and try and synthesize what's important to you as a company. So that's an example also at a holistic tool which we are creating. Yeah, so that's kind of a response across the sector. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was indeed exciting to know that there is so much of development happening across the sector. So basically, Mr. Ashutosh also echoed the same sentiment which the earlier speaker had mentioned about this relevance of stacks. He mentioned about the multiple stack. He mentioned about the agri stack. And of course, we heard about developers who are in the nascent stage, indicating again there's a lot of hope in the days ahead. A point again relevant to note here, like there is a venture capital arm of NABARD, one of its subsidiaries, the NAB Ventures, who does support this kind of initiatives. And in the, just 10 minutes back when our chairman was there in the fireside chat, immediately following his fireside conversation, there was a felicitation of an entrepreneur who was recently supported by NAB Ventures through, I think, an initial capital of about 20 CR. So as an institution, as a DFI, we are also trying to support this space to the extent possible. And great to know that. And of course, the Melina is again something that's very interesting to know. Maybe we come back later. So we have just heard about the finances and the policy issues. Now we'll turn to the individual who represents the organization, a global organization, which only in 2024 had issuances totaling more than 1 trillion in value and more than 10,000 global projects. So, ma'am, green bonds and sustainable finance instruments are increasingly data-driven, right? So how can AI and fintech enhance transparency, credibility, and investor confidence in the green bond market, specifically in the area that you operate, the entire South Asia Pacific region? Thank you.
So thank you so much, Mr. Ghosh. And before I answer your question specifically, I think it's extremely exciting to be here this afternoon. Like you said, energy is palpable and infectious. What I'm hearing on the stage is also very, very promising. What I also want to say is that NABARD, the kind of innovations that NABARD is doing in the area of green financing, I hope they get scaled up and they get mainstreamed within the larger spectrum of banking institutions. And that is one of the roles that I think all DFIs, including IFC globally and NABARD here, can play along with others. Now, just for the benefit of the audience, when we talk about green financing, there is something which is very, very clear, okay, which is the word green. And when you say green, you want to be sure that it is green, right? And that means that the data, the purpose, and everything related to your financing needs to be verifiable. And by the very definition, you would need somebody to verify, you would need somebody to manage, that financing within the institution. You would need to see that the deployment is happening correctly. And all of that is intricately linked with, the information system, right? So I see, and this has not been such a big feature till now, but when Climate Bonds screens the debt instruments which come out globally, we have line items where we say that, okay, this is how it is getting aligned. So which means that the basis, Mr. Ghosh, will become very important. And that is not AI generated. That is pretty much science driven. And those are things that you understand by terms called taxonomy, definitions. So those will become important. But what will become increasingly enabled by AI is that the interoperability of taxonomy. So what stands verifiable in the Indian context, does it also hold scrutiny in the international context, can definitely be enabled by AI, given that the right definitions are put in. So please, I mean, that I want to emphasize, garbage in, garbage out still remains very relevant today. So AI is not something that will, enable everything on its own, but it will, like you said, can unearth a lot of unstructured, structured data. And because you had labeled your instrument green, and you will have to, align with certain criteria, that can be enabled in a much more efficient manner using digital tools, using AI. The other thing is, of course, an important aspect would be that they can also enable solutions within the risk management aspect of it, which will also lead to better pricing optimization. So when you're understanding, because there are so many data points, so it'll become very important for institutions to systematize that within their information systems, and to also look at all the frameworks, and there are multiple frameworks in globally, but even the major ones, there is a whole lot of definitions, and if those could be used, say, to tag your loan books, and that can be digitized, it becomes much more easy than what it is today. By the way, there are institutions which have started doing that. So NABARD, I don't know whether you already started. I mean, you started experimenting with the idea of tagging, but how integrated that is with your information systems will actually give you a competitive advantage. The reporting aspects will become easier, enabled by AI and digital technology. Also, I know, I think IFC mentioned over here, the service providers, they are already giving you tech solutions to report, to garner data which is existing in the system. And as we sit today, RBI, in yesterday's publication of its various regulations, there is something that there is a paragraph which says capital charge for credit risk, in which besides other aspects, it is also mentioned that climate risk can also now will need to be measured by financial institutions and what their counterparties are doing. So it is going to get mainstreamed. It will depend upon data. The credibility of data will get further enabled, but what you're feeding in should not be AI generated. It should be basically be driven by science, and that is what taxonomies will enable you to do. I'll stop here. This is where I'll pause at the first round.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. That was wonderful. Specifically, the points that you did mention about the interoperability of taxonomy across, I mean, while within the organization we are trying to do this, looking at different standards. My colleagues from the climate team are here, I guess, today. So we did face this challenge of how to integrate the global taxonomies into the Indian context. And as we all know, I mean, at the country level, right now, we are yet to firm up the taxonomy, though there's a lot of work in progress as of now.
Interoperability itself is getting enabled by technology, because there is simply no other means to actually make those common principles more visible and relevant without the help of technology.
Yeah, and integrating this into the organizational information system, that is something that definitely that's very, very important, and I think that's something one needs to think about. So we move on from here. We'll come back to you for more, but in the meanwhile, we move on to Mr. Anujeet. He represents Ecofy, which is the first green NBFC of the country, and spanning across more than 25 states as of now. Yeah. So we'll hear his experience, a very, very experienced representative of his organization. And so how is Ecofy leveraging AI or Fintech to manage the risks while ensuring equitable access to green credit, both for individuals and MSMEs? And incidentally, Mr. Anujeet is the Chief Risk Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh, and thank you to the NABARD team for inviting us to be part of this esteemed panel. Yep. So I think, foremost, I think Eco'5 was created about 2.5 years back. We were set up to be one of the exclusive retail lenders. I think what we identified was there was really a gap in retail lending or retail financing when it comes to green financing. I think there were a lot of lenders who catered to the wholesale space, but retail was always ignored, and that's where we were set up. And I think one of the things that we've seen is when it comes to the retail space, what's very critical is, I think, how do you leverage alternate data? I think how do you democratize credit to a larger section? So I think that is what we've enabled in the last couple of years, in terms of leveraging AI, leveraging technology, product innovation. I think Mr. Mathur mentioned about, how do we leverage product innovation? And, we've done some bits and pieces of those. Like, for example, when it comes to rooftop solar happens to be one of the largest products that we do. Today, rather than looking at traditional frameworks, which just looks at, the underlying asset or just looking at, the credit worthiness of the customers, we actually try to underwrite the loans based on what's going to be the electricity bill savings. So the outreach to the customers is a lot more. Madam Neha mentioned about, you got to measure the impact. And that is something that we've been doing from day one. Every single loan that we've disbursed till date, we actually measure what's been the carbon footprint saving that we're doing. We actually measure them. We've got technologies that we've embedded, like, we mentioned about IoT, telematics, all of those, which today not just is used for the purpose of underwriting customers, but also from a risk management perspective, which is used as early warning signals. I think today, one of the issues that we've solved for is kind of democratizing credit and having a larger reach. I think what is the way forward is how do we also use this for making it more affordable today? I think today, the way, I was chatting up with quite a few people outside, and, one of the questions that came up was how do we really make these loans affordable going forward, right? I think today it's a new asset class. So data is getting mined day in, day out, and that is what is helping us as lenders to kind of define, in terms of credit worthiness of the customers, how the book will span up. It's a relatively new asset class, and that's why today, while we've managed to solve for, to some extent, in terms of, creating a larger outreach through data and data-enabled solution, I think next phase is going to be how do we make it a lot more affordable. I think that is, once that is done, in terms of making it a lot more affordable, I think that is where I think really the climate financing and the global impact of climate financing will be a lot more.
Thank you very much. So we again come back to you a little later for further inputs on this. So in the meanwhile, he touched upon two very core issues: democratization of credit and affordable credit. So these are the two things that actually are the cornerstone when we talk about reaching climate finance or green finance to the most vulnerable communities and the most underserved communities. That was basically the idea of even setting up this conversation in the first place. So thank you very much for your inputs. So we now move on to our fifth panelist, Mr. Aditya. He represents Credit Fair, and they are going strong right now. They are not completely green, but they are going very strong on green. And I guess this year they have a target of attaining 40% of the overall this thing. If
no,
the stats 90%. Yeah. Okay, stands corrected. Yeah. So as a fintech founder, how do you see the intersection of credit innovation and climate finance? And what role, according to you, can AI play in expanding affordable green loans for, again, the underserved households and the business? Your take on that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Sanjay and NABARD team for organizing this. Learning a lot as we go along. Thank you so much. Credit Fair was started with the mission to provide fair finance to everyone. Now, like I mentioned, we're trying to go towards 90% plus or 100% green, actually, as we speak. So we're looking to make green finance possible for everyone. And what we've seen is that if you look at it from a very macro level, we've seen rooftop solar and wind and all renewables growing at a very fast pace. But the utility scale solar, that's not enough. India needs solar at a grassroots level, or energy solutions rather, I should say, at the grassroots level. Our grid, will only be strengthened when we have distributed energy, right? And for distributed energy, affordability, the financing aspect becomes really critical. we've gone from 10-20% financing towards now 60-70%. And I think like all consumer and SME categories, we should probably head towards 80-90% transactions happening on finance. So credit itself becomes a critical enabler, and that's what we've been focusing on. To the other part of your question on AI and other ways to really make this democratic and help 1 crore Indians get access in the next 1-2 years, right? That's the Prime Minister's goal. So we need I'll say technology first. I think AI might get overused, but we need AI and technology for reducing the cost of operations. And we've been seeing that ourselves, where more than 80-90% of our customers are fully digitally onboarded. We don't need physical feet on street, and that enables us to reach 20 plus states in India without having a branch presence everywhere, right? Secondly, for fraud prevention, for risk management, that's where AI is really helpful. We've seen cases where people will stand in front of this, like different people stand in front of the same solar panels and try to take loans and get double funding. So all these sort of grassroots level issues is where we need AI to solve, right? And detect those challenges. And finally, the cost of funds is something which we would like to reduce. And then having that data available in a very reliable way, which hopefully can be shown to the final stakeholders through different and actually see that impact. I think that's the missing piece which we're looking for support on as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, I think we need to move on to the quick next round. But before that, I never really knew with the kind of stats that he's just provided, it seems Mr. Aditya is going to give Mr. Anujeet a run. So they are actually going to be competitors, it seems. Great. Anyways, so we just heard from our panelists the issues, the policy focus that is required and all that needs to be done. So quickly moving on to what could be the possible challenges. I would, in this case, begin with you, ma'am. So what key challenges do you foresee in integrating AI and fintech into the green finance space, particularly when we talk of instruments, climate resilience instruments such as bonds and the entire array of bonds which you are looking at? Thank you.
Yeah. So first of all, I will really like to broaden the scope, right? It is not restricted to bonds. The bonds have, it's a way to see the universe of green finance. But I think increasingly every financing will need to be green, as we are seeing, right? In the previous round, we discussed that you said in 24 you gave the global figure of 1 trillion. Overall, globally, we are at $6 trillion dollars worth of all kinds of bonds, loans, etc. Right? So let's not remain stuck on bonds. However, the idea of transparency is both an opportunity as well as challenge. The moment you use it as an opportunity, investors start looking at you with a different eye. So you need to label. So label is, I think, is the key message when it comes to green financing. But data, which is a power, can also be a big challenge, because if data becomes your primary factor of where the financing will go, then we also have to understand that you may not have either the granular data for everywhere, for all facets. Take the example of India. There are many parts of India which are not touched by the granularity of data that you require. Now, I'm talking in terms of say, physical risks. So what remains outside of your data purview, will that get disadvantaged in terms of the reach of finance? It's a very, very important aspect and a challenge to counter. So, and this has been happening. So whatever gets sort of geospatial coverage, wherever you can get the reach of technology, gets preferentially financed. And this this is where the combination of human prowess and technology will continue to happen or should happen until you have found technology solutions for the, like we said, unbanked areas or communities, or all of those things. The other thing, when you talk about resilience financing, there are three aspects what actually lead to manifestation of any risk, right? Which is hazard, second is vulnerability, and third is exposure. So all of these things are not only AI specific things. You can use digital technology to get better handle of things, but you will have to create systems which can take into all of these parameters. You will have to do forward scenario analysis, where again, technology will be an enabler, but the basic work is going to be far different from what has been done till now, both by recipients of money and providers of capital. So I think we will be learning along the way. We don't have all the solutions today, but what is extremely exciting is that the technology is moving extremely fast, and climate hazards or climate risk are not going to wait for it. So what are those things that we can immediately get into the picture? And again, whichever way I look at it, I come back to somehow a taxonomic approach where you can recognize, what is good as a resilience measure and what is not, whether that is soil moisture, whether that is, small check dams, reservoir systems. And those are not only the areas that NABARD looks into. All kinds of infrastructure will become important, and I think it is a very, very different area, and that by itself is a challenge and an opportunity. If you are able to run a little bit faster than others in trying to, in having succeeded at integrating technology in every operation that you do, you will better manage your risk. You will become much more attractive to investors, and your borrowers with whom you need to have the conversations will also need to take this into account. So that is the challenge. I said data is both a strength, and the weakness of it is a very, very big challenge in the times to come.
Thank you, ma'am. That was indeed pretty elaborate, and something it resonates with the kind of challenges that we were facing as an institution when we were trying to label our lendings. But given the paucity of time, I would again come back to Mr. Aditya for a quick response to, like, looking ahead, how do you think fintechs like CreditFair collaborate with DFIs and MDBs and government platforms to co-create inclusive green finance products? So since the time is less, we'd request a quicker response this time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'll give the example of agricultural and energy projects. We have recently got support from Ravo Foundation, where they're giving us a credit guarantee. And these are the sort of programs where, if we can get support from the MDBs and DFIs, where either on risk sharing or building an ecosystem. So Smart Power is one organization where they're connecting us with grassroots level installers and customers, and reducing our cost of operations, which enables us to kind of go deeper and more aggressive in the space. So these are the sort of ecosystem and risk sharing, or ultimately reducing our cost of capital. That's where we'd look for support. Thank you.
Thank you. That was pretty insightful. I mean, that was a quick response and an insightful one. So we move on to Mr. Mathur. So again, sir, a quick response this time again.
Sure.
So from a venture ecosystem lens, what policy and regulatory enablers, you have been talking about policies and enablers right in the beginning. So what do you think are needed to support these AI-driven climate fintech solutions at scale, and also integrating them into the mainstream?
Yeah, I think three very quick sort of policy support that I see. I think first and foremost, what I call it as more of a low-hanging in the food supply chain is the post-harvest part. We waste 30 to 40% of the food that we produce. It's criminal, in a country like India, where we have so many people to feed. And that's where we need a lot of focus on asset creation, especially farm level assets. Cold room, grading, sorting, packing, dehydration, milling, grinding, which is mostly in corporate or SME level, should come at the farm level. To me, those are green assets, and thankfully, Government of India has Agri Infra Fund, but we need to probably broaden the scope of it and bring some green elements into it. I think that's one. Second, I doubt we can do green financing at retail level in agriculture to begin with, at the farmer level, right? And so if you have to do at a wholesale level, what I believe we probably need to follow an index approach, And to me, Swachhata Index is a great precedence where we created competition among cities. I think it's time to create competition among villages by building, some sort of climate resilience index. So, as you would know, in PSL lending, we incentivize farmer to pay on time, and we give 2% subvention, right? 2 or 3%. Can we give farmer interest subvention if that resilience index improves? And thankfully, we have so many data points, so I don't think it's a challenge to build that index, with some bit of iteration. So that's number two. I think the last point I want to mention, again, going back to stack. So thankfully, agri-stack is going to be the foundational stack. But we also need a climate stack. We have seen some green financing at scale in EVs, in solar, in wind, but not in agri. And that's precisely the reason, because that data points are very scattered. And to me, there are three components of this climate stack: soil stack, water stack, and weather stack. Soil is essentially soil nutrition, soil carbon. Weather is largely temperature, humidity, rainfall, and water is your surface water and groundwater. So again, if we bring all these data points together, I think it becomes very sort of objective to build underwriting models, which bankers can underwrite. And again, I think government has to build it, and they have to open source it. I think the biggest challenge thankfully, most of this data is non-personal data. You don't need consent, right, from rain gods to report the data. So we can, largely it's a non-personal data, which can hopefully be open sourced for private sector consumption.
Thank you very much. You touched upon some very significant points, like the creation of a rural index kind of a thing, something that, again, NABARD has done, and our chairman today has inaugurated something like this. So it goes online from today onwards, something on the rural index. But again, I'll quickly move. Mr. Ashutosh, yeah. So what co-creation models, since you are representing an MDB and a very important one, so what co-creation models between MDBs, governments, and fintech innovators do you see as the most effective in scaling this climate finance across borders? Quick take, please.
Sure. The quick 3 points. So I think because we're talking about new DFS, AI kind of models and tools, I think responsible finance is something which is very important. It's part of a lot of work which we already do, including principles for digital finance products, which IFC World Bank Group had released, I think 6-7 years back. The RBI has also now released, I think a couple of months ago, the free AI guidelines. So I think very important that the adherence of these guidelines is done. So that's the first part on responsible AI. The second is, we've had examples of industry sandboxes. IFC's done it with EPICS in Singapore. We, of course, have both IRDAI, RBI come out with their regulatory sandbox as well. So I think this is also a way to get new ideas. I think Mr. Hemant spoke about converging data, but maybe converging also, which are the ecosystem players through an industry sandbox, or trying to understand what regulatory changes are required through a regulatory sandbox is something which can be useful. And the last thing maybe for NABARD to consider, and maybe NABARD's already doing this, is climate risk, of course, is key. There are models which I think, so you mentioned, is already being worked on. Now, because insurance companies would have already, probably factored a lot of this in earlier, there should be some synergy between the data and models which the insurance companies have, maybe IRDA, along with NABARD. Maybe it's already being done, but that can give maybe a thrust to maybe designing better credit risk models and climate risk models. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, the last point that you had made is very, very significant in terms of how it addresses risk. And we come to the last question of the day and to the final panelist. And as we all know, in real life, it's always the risk guy who has the last say. So, Mr. Anupreet, you have the last say here. So, what safeguards and risk management framework should be put in place to ensure that AI and fintech applications in green lending do not unintentionally deepen exclusions for women and other vulnerable segments.
And that's an important point. So, yeah, I think what's critical, and I'll be real quick. So, I think two things which are most critical. One is, I think, commitments from the organizations itself. So, I think today, thankfully, with the kind of funding, kind of deadlines that are coming in from a lot of DFIs, I think there are clear commitments that most lenders today have in terms of, I would say the marginalized or the excluded segments, whether it's women, marginalized farmers, rural economy, all of them. I think there are clear commitments that are being driven in terms of, what's the kind of penetration that needs to go towards financing towards this segment. So, as an organization for us as well, we've clearly drawn up commitments in terms of what should be there for the next foreseeable future. I think second is, I think more importantly, even credit models. Today, I think if you look at historical models, I think it'll clearly, I think these segments will be excluded. So when we develop these models also, you need to have a lot more inclusive segments. So I think when it's included, I think the models itself will kind of encourage that all these segments which are there will get a fair opportunity towards lending as well as, fair access towards lending.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, the second point that you had made is very, very important because as an institution, we are definitely looking very strongly towards the underserved and the most vulnerable communities. That's basically the segment that NABARD works in. And so, with that, we come to the close of the discussion. So in any case, in case the organizers approve, we can have some questions, maybe one or two, or maybe we close it. I leave it to you, ma'am. Yeah.
See, Mr. Mathur talked about index or something like that, but I think something else can be thought of, like the chemicals are being used today for soil, and the climate is being also damaged. So if the subsidy can be think of about the quality of the soil, if it is best, then subsidy can be given. So that sort of thinking if you can think of.
Yeah, frankly, again, what should I say? As you would know that we use much urea than the soil needs, essentially driven by significantly disproportionately higher subsidy on nitrogen than phosphorus and potash and other micronutrients, right? So to me, it's a data issue. Our soil testing labs, there are 11,000 soil testing labs, but unfortunately not many of them functional. Farmer don't get the data in time. It's not as useful as it should be. Thankfully, there's enough technology out there using spectroscopy and some chemical reagent based where you can get the result within 30 seconds and far more accurate. So it's just educating the farmer that this is your soil nutrition profile and this is how you should, these are the fertilizers you should be putting in. I think we'll reduce our fertilizer chemical consumption significantly. As simple as that. So there are many solutions out there. I think it's a question of maybe policymakers coming together. I don't think we really need subsidy. We need more education here.
Thank you. So.
Hey, my question is to the two rooftop solar lenders. I think you mentioned, Aditya, you mentioned a fascinating thing about how people are posing in front of the same power plant and getting double financing. What are the other kind of fraudulent checks that you have had to cover, especially in the segment that you're currently operating in?
Thanks for that. I think in terms of fraud, there are two types we primarily see. One is the installer fraud, where the solar installer or the business provider themselves are not providing the service or installation. So that's one thing which we have really tightened. We work with very selective installers to make sure the delivery on the ground is actually there. And the second example, which I mentioned already, and then I think sometimes it's more also about the early warning signals through IoT and data tracking that we can, we might not detect something upfront, but we can at least correct our mistakes for future disbursements. Thanks.
I just add, I think the single largest risk right now is collusion between installers and customers. I think that is what all finances are currently facing, because I think currently there's a huge government subsidy, right? And all that you need to have is just, if as long as there's a roof for any household, I don't think there's installation also required. You'll get a subsidy, and the subsidy is fairly significant. So if that can be averted, because there's very limited people on the ground. So I think all of these IoT-enabled technologies, anything that we can get to avert that, that is very critical. I think you can do checks and balances to ensure that you're associated with the right people. But as you say, niyat खराब होने को यहाँ पे time नहीं लगती है. So that is what we are seeing even in this segment.
I have a question for Ashutosh and probably you, sir. Ki,
I
as
think this would be the last one, right?
yeah. As we have seen, the use cases which have come out for green financing is clearly EV and solar. So basically, the market is looking for few more clear-cut indicators where lenders can go, because as you see, if opportunity flows, energy goes along with it. But I think we are looking for more use cases where lenders can easily go and plug in and put up their business model. Because as we have seen, EV has picked up and it requires no other push. Business has got their ready mix even for the solar panels as well. So do we have few ready-made cases where lenders can start deploying their capital rather than waiting and testing for others to help them with data and technology?
No, I think from an IFC perspective, both EV, rooftop solar are areas we are already financing. Both when it comes to overall mass projects, manufacturing projects, as well as through financiers. So we have done, for example, which immediately I can recall last year with Mahindra, focused line on EV buses. So this is definitely a priority for us. We are starting to finance these two as use cases. And even from the advisory side, which I'm part of advisory, we are working with financial institutions to also help look at, strengthen, study the market. So work being done, maybe not to the extent where we have a large portfolio, but this is clearly a priority area which we are looking into right now.
Yeah, just a couple of other use cases that we have come across are in climate smart agriculture, in fact. So this is an area which is picking up, and it was for resilience financing. And one of the interesting examples is Sammunity, which also funded, backstopped, of course, by Rabobank and others, but they looked at, climate smart agriculture. So that is one area that is coming up. Water infrastructure. Again, there are bonds getting issued in that space, and all of them have resilience as well as, other green aspects that are related to it. So there are a couple, but of course, more work requires to be done to diversify these use cases in different sectors.
Thank you very much. And I think we can carry on the discussion beyond this room. So, and thank you once more to my co-panelists and for being an excellent and immersed audience. Thank you so very much.
You can surely write to us. Let's take a moment to honor our panelist. I request Mr. Mrinal Ranjan, General Manager, Department of Climate Action and Sustainability, NABARD, to come forward and present the memento. We will felicitate Mr. Hemendra Mathur. Next, we will felicitate Mr. Aditya Damani.